Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are talking about How to Make a Killing, the new A24 Glen Powell movie. Just came out over the weekend. This is my first video in a while where I'm uploading right after I just saw the movie, so welcome back to the channel. If you're new around here and you don't know, I am on a journey to watch as many 2026 new releases as I can and rank all of them by the end of the year. So if you want to keep up to date with my journey, you can check out all of my reviews on my channel, and a few movies that I didn't make reviews on here you can find over on my Letterboxd, where you can also find the list of every single movie I've seen this year, ranked from worst to best, that I will eventually make into the video. That being said, I just want to jump right into this one, so stick around, let's talk about How to Make a Killing. So, How to Make a Killing, the new A24 Glen Powell movie, is pretty good. It's a pretty good movie, to say the least. Spoiler alert, it's a pretty good movie. Not going to have any spoilers in this video, but yeah, it's a pretty good movie. You follow Glen Powell as he recounts how he killed off the other family members in his family so that he can be the heir to multiple billions of dollars, as well as estates and planes and whatever. And you get kind of this catalog of his events leading up to what happens in the movie, or at the end of the movie, I guess. And throughout the story, there are a lot of twists and turns that are not necessarily the most, unique, but definitely fun and engaging, to say the least. And this movie does offer a lot, but I'm going to start with the negatives. I tend to kind of jump around, but I'm going to start with the negatives today. And the negative for me is that this movie, really the only negative I have, is that this movie is a little bit generic. Just a tad. I don't think there's anything interesting in the cinematography department. It kind of just looks like every other movie you would see of this quality. So there's not really anything crazy going on there. It also didn't help that I had a pretty close-up seat because I had assumed the theater was full because all the seats were taken, and it wasn't, so I could have just moved. But regardless, I had a pretty close-up seat, so everything was very grainy, which was really annoying, so it didn't help cinematography-wise. But for the most part, this movie is not really all that unique in the directing department. When it comes to the script, the movie is very quippy. A lot of the time, it can be very slick, very smooth. There are a few characters who are a little bit less important to the plot that do feel a little bit rushed or of less relevance, which is fine. It kind of works, but their performances and mainly the way that they're written in the script is not as entertaining as Glen Powell's main lead performance. And we'll talk about him later, but those are kind of my only big negatives. Just this movie does have a few generic things about it, and I think in general the plot of this movie is a little generic. There's not really... I mean, we've kind of done the same thing in just the last few months with No Other Choice, where you have a guy who's pushed to the brink and he starts killing people to get money. Like, we've kind of seen this already done in just the last, 3 months, so it's not really a new, thing. It just kind of... I saw a review for this movie that was saying it kind of reheated the nachos of No Other Choice. I disagree with that. I think this movie is a little bit more, or does have a little bit more flavor to it than just being a clone of a different movie, but it does have similar elements, so if you've already seen No Other Choice, this movie is going to be just one that you think is probably okay. Let's move on to the mix, though, and the mix for me is going to be Margaret Qualley in this movie. I really like Margaret Qualley. I think she was great in The Substance, and I can't think of anything else I've seen her in that I enjoyed, unfortunately. But I do really like her in The Substance. I think she was great. And I've heard she was good in Blue Moon. I think she's a good actress. I'm not, she doesn't bother me in any way. But last year, one of my least favorite movies I saw was Honey Don't, and she was the lead character, and she definitely could not sell that movie for me. And here in this movie, I think she's a great actress. She plays her character very well, but the way that her character is written is very pretentious and very annoying, and it kind of, every time she was on screen, would really rub me the wrong way. I didn't enjoy watching her character. I thought all of her scenes were despicable for the most part, and I get that that was kind of the point, and this is weird putting this in the mixed category, but I feel like when you have a good kind of villain character, or I guess she's kind of not really of the villain, but you have a good character that's kind of morally gray, you have to give them a few good qualities to even it out, but every single time she was on screen, I was like, yeah, not as interested as any other time. So nothing against Margaret Qualley. I think she's great. She's a great actress. I just did not like her in this movie. The other mixed thing for me is going to be the kind of the ending. I like the ending in terms of the way it subverts expectations, but I don't think it was the best way to end this story. It could have been a little bit more cinematically, just to have a little bit more cinematic flair to it than being kind of this generic ending that it got. Not going to have any spoilers, but I do think the ending is what didn't sell me as highly on this movie when I was engaged for the most part. And the last mixed I'm going to give is that there are some of the family members that you get to really, really know, and he befriends, and you get to know a lot about them before they eventually get taken out of the movie. And then there's other ones that don't get the same treatment. So you have this kind of mix mash where sometimes it'll be, the same thing, and you'll get like a lot of backstory on who the character is, and they'll be very interesting, and it'll be cool. And then other times you won't really get any knowledge on them, and he'll just kind of kill them off, and that's it. So that was a little disappointing for the most part, but let's talk about the positives, because there are still a lot of positives to go. And the biggest positive for me in this entire movie is going to be Glen Powell. There is pretty much not a single movie that Glen Powell's been in where I didn't think in some way he elevated my experience with the movie. Granted, some of his earlier works, he's not really a main character, like The Dark Knight Rises, for example. I love that movie, but it's not because Glen Powell is in it, But with last year, we had The Running Man. I thought that movie was great, and it was because Glen Powell really sold me on that movie. A couple years ago, we had Hitman. I thought he was phenomenal in that movie, and he sold me on it really high. And now we have this movie here. And once again, Glen Powell is fantastic in this movie, and he really just sells every film that he's in. I genuinely sometimes will just, like, if I see Glen Powell attached to a movie, that's got me, I've got a ticket to that. Like, I'm gonna go see Glen Powell in movies because I think he's great. He's a really good actor, he's really fun to watch on screen, and in my opinion, this is one of his better roles. I do think The Running Man is ultimately a more enjoyable movie, and his role is a little bit more fun. And I think Hitman, out of the three I named, is my favorite. But this movie is still really great, and he does a lot of heavy lifting in that department. The other positive I'm going to say is that the few family members that do get fleshed out in this movie are all really great. The ones that do have some fleshing out and some actual character traits that we get to learn throughout the film, they are very interesting, and it's nice to see them be interesting. Especially because the other few characters in the film that are main staples, mainly talking about Margaret Qualley, who appears a lot in this movie, are a little bit more of a kind of shallow character that I'm not as interested in. So it's nice to have some dynamics that work very well with the family. And my other positive I want to mention, I'm kind of going quickly through these a lot faster than I thought I was gonna go. But my other positive that I want to mention is that I think the actress who plays Ruth, Jessica Henwick, I had to Google her name because I completely forgot it, but Jessica Henwick, I think, is also really great in this movie. I really like pretty much every movie that Glen Powell's in. I've noticed this. There's very good side, kind of side plots to the movie, especially when it comes to Glen Powell and his relationship with whatever significant other he has in the film. Like in Hitman, it's a little bit more direct because that's kind of the main plot, and then in Running Man, it's less direct because he doesn't really see his family that much. But here in this movie, you kind of had the best of both worlds, where Ruth is a character that's recurring, but she's also a little bit more in the background, so you get this very nice kind of duality between kind of the family man image and the kind of trying to get the inheritance image. And Glen Powell, like I mentioned, sells that really well, but I also think Jessica Henwick is great in this role, and she does a very good job of kind of complementing Glen Powell's massive, charismatic personality, and it works really well, and I enjoyed her in this film a lot more than I enjoyed Margaret Qualley. So there's that. The last thing I want to say, actually, in kind of fumbling back all the way because I completely skipped out on it, want to add one more thing to the kind of mixed negative, I would say. It's mixed, but definitely leaning negative, is this movie does not have a very interesting score or soundtrack. I didn't really like any of the songs in here. The opening song, the song in the credits, I thought all of it was kind of boring, so that also doesn't help the case with this movie. But regardless, there's one more thing I want to add to the positive. I know I keep going back and forth. Sorry about that. I just needed to get my thought out there before I forgot about it. But last thing I want to say in the positives is the humor. I completely forgot to even add this. I'm going crazy. But this movie is very funny. Like, there's a lot of very good comedic timing, and it's very well put together. They do a good job of combining the serious tone of the kind of the backstory and the tragedy of the event with the comedic, ridiculous, he has to kill people and it doesn't really make sense kind of thing. And it works really well in the movie's favor. And like I said, Glen Powell is so good at being both charismatic and serious at the same time that he's able to sell that kind of a character really well. I saw a lot of comments saying that Glen Powell needs to be in the American Psycho remake if they ever do one. And yeah, I think Glen Powell could be a great replacement for Christian Bale in an American Psycho remake, in American Psycho remake. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about How to Make a Killing. I know that was a very long-winded, very fast-moving review. I've been trying to keep my reviews a little bit slower paced, but I was just really excited to talk about this one. So there you go. That's How to Make a Killing. I gave this movie a 7 out of 10, and so a 3.5 star out of 10, or out of 5 stars. 3.5 out of 5 stars. 7 out of 10. And I enjoyed it. It's pretty high up on my 2026 ranked, but in all regards, we have had a lot of bad movies this year, some of which I've completely skipped even making reviews on, or even watching in the theater, but check out my last video if you want to hear about that. But anyways, that's all I have to say about How to Make a Killing. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps out my channel, and it motivates me to keep trucking with these reviews. So, with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace out.